Senator Clark moves to reconsider. Members, this is because of the rulemaking in the bill. It actually needs a stop in the Committee on State and Local Government.
So moved, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Clark. Moves Senate File 3625 be recommended to pass and referred to.
Chair,
sorry.
we first, pardon me, Chair.
Thank you.
We'll first need to move.
Reconsider.
Yes, reconsider.
Thank you. Okay, so Senator Clark's motion was on reconsidering Senate File 3625. So on that motion to reconsider, members, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion prevails. And now you've got another motion, Senator Clark.
Yes, Chair. So I'll move that same bill, the Pellsby bill, Senate File 3625, be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on State and Local Government.
Thank you. So on that motion, Senator Clark moves that Senate File 3625 be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on State and Local Government. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion prevails. Hello, Senator Kunesh. I see you're here. So I believe we're going to Senate File 3611 when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members. The bill I have in front of you, 3611, is a bill that would limit access to school sites by federal immigration enforcement. It would, let me look here. Prohibits school districts and charter schools from consenting to federal, state, or local officials entering school sites for the purposes of immigration enforcement unless the official provides a school employee with a valid judicial warrant. Then the school employees are required to request a valid identification from the immigration enforcement official and only grant entry to areas outlined in the judicial warrant that was shown to the employee. A school employee granting entry to an immigration enforcement official must immediately notify the district superintendent or school administrator and the school's general counsel or other designated legal representation. It's important to note that this bill does not prohibit entry by an official administering a state or federally supported education system. It also includes a severability clause in the event the application of the law is found to be unconstitutional and void, and then the remaining provision of the law will remain the same. It's important to recognize that at one time, schools, this was the norm for schools, but in the beginning of the year, the federal government removed those expectations from our schools, and now we have seen the devastation of ICE in our schools. And I'm going to talk about what I know, and I know personally because I have represented Columbia Heights Public Schools for the 10 years of my legislature, and we've never seen anything like we've seen since the beginning of January. The actions by ICE agents included stopping students on their way to school, severely impacting the community, causing widespread fear, increased student absenteeism, and prompting school leaders to demand safe, sensitive location status. We had students detained. At least 4 of our students were initially reported as detained by ICE agents in just one single day. And that included a 17-year-old boy taken from a car and another student taken from an apartment. You've all heard the case of Liam, the 5-year-old student Liam Ramos, who was detained with his father in the driveway after leaving his school. And it was apparent to those that were there, and if you saw the video, ICE agents used that child to lure his father out and tried to lure his mother as well. The community impact has been significant. At least 30 parents of students at Valley View Elementary were detained, leading to students being left without care, moving on to online learning due to fear. And those ICE agents have also affected the school property as well, with ICE agents driving onto high school property, prompting administrators to tell them to leave. There have been many instances at just, not our regular public schools, but at our charter schools where they have witnessed enforcement vehicles and ICE agents near the school looking into the building with binoculars. Of course, we saw that they wore masks and dressed in camouflage and other military clothing, wearing weapons that were visible, and really instilled fear to the students, staff, and families, as well as deploying chemical irritants. And you may have heard those stories from Roosevelt High School. Those unmarked schools circling buildings triggering secure holds as well. For almost a month and a half, every morning I would get up and I would dress in layers upon layers and go to different schools in my community to patrol the sidewalk, to make sure that the students were walking safely across the street. All the time in many of those instances as ICE patrols circled those buildings like sharks. And I can tell you there was a time where one of the ICE vehicles drove by once, looked at me, drove by twice, looked at me, and the third time he rolled down his window, looked directly at me with a very menacing look, and said, "Well, good morning, Mary. Nice to see you here." If you don't think that put fear in me, it certainly did. Especially after having had my name and my address on that hit list from the guy that shot Melissa Hortman, her husband, John Hoffman, his family. And so we saw many incidences of where ICE would pull into loading docks or use the parking lots as an area to deploy their vehicles and to kind of rally up. And so this bill ensures that if there is an incident that warrants immigration enforcement, that our schools are a safe place where our students don't have to worry about that, whether they are of whatever immigration or citizens, as well as staff and as administration. So I hope that you will all support this bill 3611.
Thank you, Senator Kunesh. We're going to move to our testifiers. We have two online. We'll start with Brenda Lewis, Superintendent from Fridley Public Schools.
Good evening, committee members and chair. It is my honor to be here tonight, very much in support of this bill. Unfortunately, immigration enforcement and active warrants is not what happened in Fridley Public Schools, where I'm the superintendent of schools. What we saw happen one morning is we had 6 ICE vehicles up and down outside of our neighborhood elementary school, less than 100 feet from the entrance. We had those 6 vehicles circling a roundabout, preventing our children and our adult crossing guards from crossing children to make it to school safely. At the same time, we had an ICE vehicle filled with 4 agents wearing wristbands on their upper arms, stating that they were media when they were not media and did not have any media credentials, yelling and screaming at our principal and our staff, inciting fear. We then had a mother who was very alarmed and had been being chased by 2 ICE vehicles, who is in the country legally and had to seek refuge by our school parking lot where the buses were to get her in, to get her child out of the back seat of the car for school. That morning, we had to walk our children in out of an absolute fear and terror that they would be getting taken by ICE or our parents. At the same time, we had a school board member who's a US-born citizen who was followed from her home very near that elementary school and followed with her 3-year-old in the back all the way to daycare. I was also followed twice by ICE agents at 2 different times. Several of our board members have been followed. Our board members have had ICE staying outside of their homes. None of this is about immigration enforcement. We are very happy, as we do with other legal documents, to comply with any warrants. Unfortunately, what Fridley Public Schools and other school districts have seen has nothing to do with duly executed warrants. Very much in favor of this bill. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Lewis. We'll move to Mary Granlin, Board Chair from Columbia Heights Public Schools.
Hi, thank you so much for having me be here. I am Mary Granlin, School Board Chair of Columbia Heights Public Schools, and I'm honored to be able to speak with you this evening in support of this bill. I'm pretty sure that everyone here supports children being safe in schools, and we can all agree that schools should be safe places to learn, and we all know that children learn best when they feel safe. In January 2025, we prepared our students, our staff, our families, and communities for law-abiding immigration enforcement. What we have seen and experienced is not and was not that. Prior to the surge, we had men and women in masks with no badges, driving recklessly in unmarked caravans like marauders in our streets, breaking windows and leaving cars abandoned and still running. Often we would get these reports from children and parents as they drove to school. The first time we had ICE on our school property was January 3rd of this year. It was a Saturday, and our school was hosting a volleyball tournament. These officers did not come to our doors. They sat in our parking lot, watching vehicles pass like it was a fishing expedition. They were asked to leave twice, the second time ending with them recording my vehicle, my license plate, and reciting my whole name and address to me in what can only be considered an attempt to intimidate me for asking them to leave our school property. This was the first, but it was not the last time that happened. The entire time we have had ICE present in our community, from October 2025 and continuing to today, they have not once come to our doors and presented a warrant. Instead, they drive around our schools like vultures. They drive onto our property with no warrants, with no identification, and masks across their faces, seemingly hoping to catch a student, staff, or family member. We were and are prepared for ICE to arrive with warrants. We expected them to follow the laws set forth by our state and the Constitution. They have not. What we are asking is for your support to help our schools be safe places for children to learn. We are very much in support of this bill. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, do we have any questions for our testifiers? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first question that I have is on the back page, page 2. We talked about severability before and discovered that severability application is already in Minnesota, and it covers, it's a blanket policy. So making it separate or recognize it separately for each statute is not necessary. We could have counsel explain it again for everyone's benefit.
Senator Limmer, are you asking counsel to explain?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, yes, under Chapter 645, there is a severability provision, and I think it's been on the books since like 1941, so there's probably some case law that might be helpful in terms of that and probably justifies taking this provision out.
Senator Limmer.
Madam Chair, I would move to strike lines 2.1 through 2.4 on the bill.
Madam Chair.
Senator Kunesh.
My question then would be to council, is there any harm in keeping it on there? Just to make sure that it's codified with this bill.
Ms. Primo.
Madam Chair and members, sorry. The only harm would be, I think I might have explained this a little bit in the previous, on the previous bill, is that the provision that's in 645 probably has case law. It's much lengthier than this provision that's currently in the bill, and the harm would be that provision would potentially not be applied, or I'm not sure how it works if there are two severability provisions, one with the presumption in 645 versus a new one here. I don't know how that would work. So that's the one harm to keeping it in.
Senator Kunesh.
Under that sort of explanation and perhaps counsel, I would be willing to have that removed.
So,
Can they?
Senator Kunesh, it sounds like Senator Limmer might have a motion,
Okay.
and you would be willing to accept that.
I am willing to accept that.
Okay, I'll go to Senator Limmer.
Yes, I move that lines 2.1 through 2.4 be stricken from the bill.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? All right, Senator Limmer moves that lines 2.1 through 2.4 be stricken from the bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment's adopted.
Thank you.
Senator Holmstrom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kunesh, on line 1.9, we referred to a school site. I wasn't able to find a definition in law of what a school site is. Can you define that?
Senator Kunesh?
Sure. Well, a school site would be the environment and the property that a school sits on. So it's legal property that we consider part of the school as a whole.
Senator Holmstrom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So they're legal property and environment. Can you define what you mean by environment?
I would say
Senator
that.
Kunesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The environment would include the building, the grounds, the playgrounds, if there are fields that are part of that, as well as any of the sidewalks or areas that, parking lots that are connected by property or by law of a school site.
Senator Holmstrom?
There is a definition of site in 123B.04. Do we want to maybe consider making this more clear language?
Madam Chair,
Senator Kunesh?
if you'd like to explain that definition to me.
Senator Holmstrom?
Sure, just a moment. Thank you. All right, Senator Kunesh, so a definition of an education site means a separate facility, a program within a facility or within a district is an education site, and the school board recognizes it as a site. I think that's a more clear definition about the school property.
Senator Kunesh.
Mr. Chair, again, I guess I would ask legal if that is necessary to include that definition.
Mr. Backus.
Mr. Chair, members, obviously it's up to the committee if they're comfortable either defining it or not defining it. These are education provisions that I'm really not that familiar with. I do know that there is a definition of school site in 125B.15, paragraph E, but that then refers you to an education site in 123B.04 subdivision 1 or charter school. I did ask our educational counsel a few days ago, and I believe she said it's something to the effect it's used quite frequently and defined infrequently, and referred me to that definition. So again, if you're comfortable, citing that definition, it's up to the committee.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Backus, is there only one definition in statute?
Mr. Chair, that's the only definition I'm aware of.
Senator Kunesh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for council again. according to that definition, are there any areas that it precludes from being a school that perhaps that we've mentioned, such as parking lots or playgrounds, things like that?
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
members,
Backus.
I am not comfortable answering that question right now. I'd have to look into it.
Okay, all right.
Senator Kunesh.
So, Mr. Chair, until I have a clear understanding of what the school site is, then I would prefer not to add anything to the bill at this time. And if the senator wants to work with me on that, we can take a look at it.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll move on to another question I have. So a school employee allows a federal agent into the building without a warrant. What happens to that employee?
Mr. Chair and Senator, I'm going to assume that that would be up to the local administration and school district and school board to decide if there's any action that is warranted by that.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that this bill is troubling, to say the least. We're asking we're asking staff, we're asking teachers to come between federal law enforcement and their job when we're not very clearly defining what the rules even are. And to be frank, I heard all your testifiers. I didn't hear any. They were talking about them being on the roads. Maybe one was talking about the parking lot, but they were on public property. They weren't coming into the schools. So I don't understand what the purpose of this is. If there wasn't even, I mean, you had ample time to find testifiers that could tell us stories about ICE enforcement coming into schools and rounding people up, but you didn't do that because it doesn't exist. So I guess I'd like to hear your response to that in light of this not being a clear problem right now.
Senator Kunesh.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind you that up until January 20th of 2025, the Trump administration then rescinded a provision that classified schools as protected spaces from immigrant enforcement. So this was law prior to January of 2025. And why would that be removed? Why would they allow armed, masked agents to get onto school property, be on school property, go into schools with no warrant? It's very simple. We are asking for a legal warrant and a legal reason for them to be on school property. And as you heard from the testifier, from the superintendent, they have no problem working with federal agents if it's legitimate. But Senator, you didn't live in the communities that we lived in. You didn't see the havoc that this raised. You didn't see the fear in the children's faces, the teachers' faces, or anyone else. You didn't see cars sitting idle in the middle of the street with the doors open after somebody has been taken from their vehicle and then dropped off a mile or two away when the agent realized that the person was a citizen of the United States. You didn't see them hassling our businesses and targeting people of color. What we have here is a bill that will make sure that if these agents, and they are legitimate agents, want to enter our school for immigration reasons, whether it happened or didn't, and if you want to look up what happened at Roosevelt School, you will see exactly what happened. But just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen and it doesn't exist. We are making sure that our students and our schools are safe, and that's what this bill does.
So members, the bill before us specifically has some language about limiting access. So the question only is, does this committee wish to limit access as it's described in the bill? Senator Holmstrom, did you have a follow-up? You don't have to have one if you're not raising your hand. I just want to respect if you do.
I would gladly have a follow-up.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Kunesh, I think you posed an interesting question of why would they remove that guideline? And I think it's clear that under the last Democrat administration, we allowed 20 million plus people into this country without any vetting. There was a serious national security threat. That is why it happened. It happened because Governor Walz chose to flout Minnesota as a place to come and have sanctuary. That is why this happened. That's the reality. And the constant refusal to obey and respect the law and respect the people of Minnesota and the people of this country is the reason that this happened. So I think it's clear that this bill is not well-defined. I think it puts teachers and school staff in a very difficult position. I don't think it's well thought out, and I'll be a no vote. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on Senate File 3611? Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, I hope that we can all stay calm tonight, but I think the senator is very much mistaken that the United States has a very, very stringent review system for immigrants coming into the country. Many of them languish in refugee camps for years while they wait for approval to come here. We have welcomed immigrants for decades to Minnesota, and they've added a lot of economic vitality to small communities and neighborhoods in my district as well. And they don't deserve to be treated like this. These are legal citizens who have been vetted thoroughly. So I'm sorry to say that, but you are very much mistaken.
Is there any, Senator Limmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Kunesh, I want to create a situation in your mind. Would this prohibit a federal agent from chasing a felon, and the felon, let's assume, is not a citizen of the United States, and running into a school with a gun? This would prohibit, would this prohibit federal agents from chasing him into the school? It says here, a school district must not consent to a federal, state, or local official entering a school site. And the reason I bring that up is we've all had discussions about law enforcement requiring a warrant, but there are times, emergencies, chasing a felon somewhere, and for the sake of safety, they're allowed to pursue and search for that individual. So does that negate that possibility?
Senator Limmer, on line 1.9 after school site, it says for purposes of immigration enforcement. So if there are other purposes not related to immigration enforcement, such as a felon fleeing a peace officer, someone perhaps they believe ineligibly possesses a firearm, or they'd committed a crime that justifies pursuing someone, that would no longer be for immigration enforcement. That would be for other legitimate law enforcement purposes, and it would not be covered by this bill as I read it. Senator Kunesh, do you read it differently?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that's exactly how I read it. And as the Chair of Education Finance, we have been reviewing and strengthening the expectations of what happens when somebody who, is a bad actor enters the school or threatens the school, and the protocol that goes along with that. And so my answer to that was would be also, yes, this is about immigration enforcement, but also be rest assured that there are plenty of steps and protocol in place when there are persons who would be violent in a school, around a school, should enter the school, and then those protocols would be, excuse me, would be followed.
Senator Limmer, follow-up?
Yes. Situation I created was that the law enforcement knew that the individual was improperly here, was not a citizen of the United States. There is certainly evidence of a criminal element that came across borders illegally, and it's not too far afield to think that there could be some still here, and they may pose a threat to children if they got in a school. So again, I see that this may prevent federal law enforcement to pursue that criminal. I'm a little hesitant to think that law enforcement would have to stop at the sidewalk of school grounds when someone that might be here illegally and being pursued by law enforcement and is hiding in a school. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Westlin.
So what I understood your original scenario to be was somebody had a gun. So whether or not they're here legally or illegally, you were describing a situation where somebody runs into a school and they have a gun. There are exigent circumstances that allow for law enforcement to pursue someone. The fact that someone may be in this country without documentation is a civil offense. And that in and of itself, the fact that somebody might be here without documents and they go into a school, the question is, are they a danger to the kids? The fact that they've crossed the border without papers or don't have documented status here does not mean that they are dangerous. But if you're describing any person, whatever their immigration status, who enters a school or attempts to enter a school and clearly has a weapon of some sort, I'm pretty sure law enforcement's going to go into the school.
Senator Kunesh, is it your desire to do anything with regard to the definition of school site? Council and I have been reviewing some potential definitions found in a variety of statutes, and I personally think it might be helpful to have some clarity because there are several different definitions of statute as to what site means, and none of them fit precisely with the way you described it.
Okay.
So I think it'd be helpful for clarity, given the nature of this, that it be clearly defined. We're going to be laying this bill over for a little bit.
Got it.
As we proceed with other bills in a similar vein. I'm going to suggest maybe you consult with counsel or give some thought to writing out a definition that meets your intentions here. And then we can take a look at that, because I think the last thing any of us want is an ambiguity about what is or is not considered the prohibited location. So, I mean, would you agree with that? I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Mr. Chair, yes, I would be willing, if you laid this over, we will work on creating and crafting a definition of school site that matches the protective nature of this bill.
Okay. Before we lay this over, is there any further discussion relating to the language in the bill from members of the committee? I'm not seeing any. So Senate File 3611 is laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's get everyone out before I go on and take on the other stuff. No, I know. General. Senator Maye Quade. All right, Senate File 3616 is before us. Senator Maye Quade, please describe the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thanks for taking time on a very busy day to hear Senate File 3616. When I was pregnant, we found a daycare for my daughter, and we picked it because when we were touring, we saw the kids, they were having fun, but as we were in the walkway, a little girl who was coming from the playground to the classroom ran up to the daycare director and gave her a hug. And it was just so clear that these children loved these teachers, loved this director, that we had to send our daughter there. It's a Spanish immersion school. Most of the teachers are from Venezuela, Mexico, and Ecuador. But these are not just teachers. They are incredible teachers, but they're also moms. They have kids that go to the school. They're our friends. We have play dates and wine nights. We go to birthday parties together. And in December, when Operation Metro Surge started, we reactivated a group that we had started in February of 2025, knowing that our teachers and friends could be in danger. And in January, we saw a staff member from the Minneapolis location of our daycare chain being detained outside of the daycare during drop-off, in front of babies, in front of parents, and we sprung into action. That daycare member was lawfully present in this country, had a work permit, was beloved by the community, and we just wondered how long before that came to our school. And unfortunately, we didn't have to wonder long. I started going to the Spanish daycares right near us. They lured a worker outside from a daycare up the block about a car crash, lied about a car crash, detained her for several hours before finding out she was a citizen and letting her go. We had a different daycare center where ICE attempted to enter and were only turned away because of the double locks between the outside and the inside and the kids. We had parents with remote work policies working from the daycare for months. They sat in the parking lots from the time teachers arrived before kids ever got there until they left. We organized rides for teachers. We would deliver groceries, drop their kids off at school. We would text each other every night and say, Mrs. B got home safe. Mrs. F had to go somewhere else for a few hours. Mrs. F didn't go home at all. Mrs. V's son had to stay overnight at his caretaker's house. It was truly horrific. I do not know how to describe how awful it has been. Up until January 2025, 4 decades, through Bush and Obama and Trump 1 and Biden, daycare centers, courthouses, hospitals, schools, and churches were sensitive places under every administration until last January. And the questions I was asking myself, will my daughter's teacher be taken by armed masked men in front of her for no reason? Will they come into her school with guns? Will they take my daughter because she speaks Spanish? Will they take her friends because they're brown? These are not questions that I should have been asking myself, but they're not questions any parent should be asking themselves about their daughter's or son's daycare. And these certainly aren't the questions that the teachers who teach our youngest Minnesotans should having to be asking themselves. They should be worrying about circle time and proyecto time, or how cold is it outside and can we get all these rambunctious kiddos out to the playground? Not, will they circle our daycare again? Do we have to keep them inside because they pulled over a car right in front of the parking or the playground, ripped someone out of it and left the car there idling for several hours? So Senate File 3616 makes sure that daycares in Minnesota are protected spaces again, where our youngest Minnesotans, our babies, the toddlers, and the people who love and teach them are safe. And with that, I will turn it over to our testifiers, Mr. Chair.
All right, members, we have some testifiers online here. I believe that we have Carol Engelhardt from Unidos.
Hello, my name is Carol Engelhardt. Yes, I'm from Unidos Faith in Minnesota leader. I'm also a mother, grandmother, retired nurse. And I'm speaking today on what happened to our church daycare and preschool in December. Our church staff and our teachers were all trained in rapid response, what to do if ICE came. And we are in a central Minneapolis location, so ICE did come. And they ran out to the parking lot and said, this is private parking lot. Where is your judicial warrant? Where is your judicial warrant? They said, we don't need one. We can do whatever we want. And they took an East African male while he screamed for his life, don't kill me, don't kill me. In the presence of preschool children and daycare mothers and teachers just trying to bring their children to thrive, to be educated. to live in peace and grow up. We know that 0 to 3 and 0 to 5 is very important for brain health and development of the child. So what is this trauma causing these children? What is this trauma causing these children? So we organized patrols and sat out there every day to make sure that our children were safe, our families were safe, so they felt confident to go to school. But this is not the Minnesota I want. I want a Minnesota where our children or families can thrive and feel safe. And I'm going to answer that, Senator. Yes, if there is a person that is a criminal and has a gun and they're going through any building, yes, I want law officers to pursue them. But we're talking about many vehicles with armed officers with guns and being in the presence of our children when it's not needed. It's not needed. My daughter is a director and owner of a daycare preschool, and she said this to me: are armed officers going to come to my school where there's children? Are armed officers going to come to my school where there's children? She shouldn't have to be thinking of that. She wants her children to thrive, and the parents that are at work trust her that the children are safe. So should we have to protect children from our own federal government? I ask you, as a grandmother, a mother, a retired nurse, who when I was working in Minneapolis schools, my last job as a nurse, which I dearly loved, I never had to worry about the safety of the children at the school from ICE, not ICE on the sidewalk, not ICE in the parking lot or the playground, but the federal government. Let's be sober about this. So I'm asking you to pass this bill because it only makes sense that you have to have a judicial warrant and you honor the Fourth Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Engelhardt, for your testimony. Kelly Anderson, are you online?
Yes, good evening.
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. I know it's been a long day. My name is Kelly Anderson, and I am a mother in our Spanish immersion school community. I have 2 children, one who is now in kindergarten and one who is still just 3 in preschool. And from the beginning, this school has been more than a place of learning. It's been a second home. Our teachers are woven into our daily lives. They teach our children not just Spanish, and I apologize if you can hear my dog, but patience, kindness, confidence, and curiosity. They are the adults our children trust, and they are the people that we trust. And that's why what happened this year was so shattering, because the same teachers that made our children feel safe, known, and loved suddenly did not feel safe themselves. And these were not abstract fears, these were real daily fears. Teachers who are here through lawful means or are permanent residents themselves became afraid to drive to work, step outside for lunch, or even be in public. The fear that they felt changed the heartbeat of our community, and it was because of ICE and their operation. As parents, we refused to watch it happen. Instead, we acted because that's what a true community does. We organized shifts so there were always a parent physically present in the building all day long. We brought lunches to the school for weeks so they wouldn't have to leave. We set up carpools so no teacher had to drive alone. We raised funds for groceries, childcare, supplies, and even potential legal fees, anything that they needed. I personally spent over 50 hours at the school. I was there as a mother first, simply wanting our teachers to feel supported. But I am a lawyer, and because my background is in the legal field, I did what I could to help the school feel a little more informed and prepared. I offered general information about warrants and what rights the school had, and I helped create talking points so staff wouldn't be alone in their fear. I kept hoping that my legal knowledge wouldn't be needed, but inside I was terrified that if ICE arrived, the law that I was so prepared to defend would be disregarded, and nothing that I said or did would help anyone. And I had never imagined I would be quietly stationed inside of a preschool, constantly looking through the window to ensure that the people who care for our children could feel safe at work. And I very much want to note that whether or not ICE is entering these schools, completely misses the point. The issue is the downstream effect on access to education, student participation, and family engagement. Actions taken outside of the school and in the community can still create barriers or chilling effects that schools then have to manage. For example, my child was terrified to be dropped off at school for 2 months straight. All of the kids were talking about the bad guys. They wanted to know why I was taking one of the teacher's daughter to school every morning, or perhaps not being able to make my son's hockey game. And I also very much want to know that many of the people and children this bill would be protecting who are here lawfully were here before any of the border issues under Biden. Their presence in Minnesota is not why this happened. And what still breaks me is this question: for what? What was this fear about? There are no dangerous criminals hiding in preschool classrooms. There are no threats sitting cross-legged on rugs during circle time. There are only alternatives. These are children and the teacher who care for them, teachers who have a right to be here, who we want here, teachers who deserve safety, dignity, and peace. As a lawyer, watching the actions of ICE was shameful. I deeply respect the Constitution, due process, and the belief that the law is supposed to protect people. From what I saw, it felt like a painful disregard for those principles. The people following the law were the ones afraid, and the children watching them were the ones who paid the price. So here's my plea: protect our children, protect their teachers, and let school be a place of joy, predictability, and safety again. Our kids didn't create this, they didn't cause this, and they should never have had to witness or be a part of it. Thank you so much for listening to what our school community lived through and for caring about the teachers and children who deserve so much better. I ask you to support this bill.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Anderson. Members, at this time, we'll open it up for discussion from members of the committee. Is there any discussion? The intent is to lay this over for possible inclusion in another bill. Not seeing any discussion, Senate File 3616 is laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Bolden. Senator Bolden is going to be addressing Senate File 3803 on behalf of its chief author, Senator Mann. Members, the bill is being distributed with its materials. While that's happening, Senator Bolden, go ahead and describe your bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 1982, the Supreme Court established Plyler v. Doe that denying undocumented children access to a free public education violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and affirmed that all children are entitled to an education. When we are thinking about what is best for society and the greater good of every single person who lives within America's borders, this makes perfect sense. Denying education to innocent children who have no control over their immigration status would create a permanent underclass of uneducated people, which would impose significant long-term costs on society, including lower rates of literacy, higher rates of unemployment, and higher rates of crime. So for over 40 years now, the decision has allowed millions of children to attend school, contributing to increased economic mobility, higher workforce participation, and improved public health for every American. This bill would codify Plyler v. Doe at a state level and will decrease the chilling effects of having ICE in our communities and near our schools. We have seen, as we have just heard, and we continue to see, that Plyler v. Doe alone is not enough to mitigate the chilling effect that is keeping children from coming to school. Today, and in this year, we have some Minnesota classrooms that have had up to 50% of children missing. Every child deserves a quality education, and this bill would ensure that that is not based on immigration status. And with that, Madam Chair, I believe we have some testifiers.
Thank you, Senator Bolden. I had Sarah Lopez signed up to testify, but if you have another testifier present. If you want to just begin by introducing yourself.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am here today in strong support of Senate File 3803. I am an immigrant who benefited from federal protections guaranteeing the right to an education regardless of my immigration status. At its core, Senate File 3803 is about data governance, liability, and compliance under Chapter 13, and more protections from misuse of data. Right now, there is a gap between the constitutional right to education and how student information is actually handled in practice across districts without clear statutory guardrails. Senate File 3803 resolves this ambiguity. It establishes that schools should not collect or disclose information about a student's actual or perceived immigration status, aligns data practices with constitutional protections, and provides uniform statewide standards so districts are not left to interpret this on their own. This is not just about compliance, it's about preventing harm before it happens. Because when families believe their data could be used against them, they disengage. We are already seeing the consequences of increased absenteeism, declining participation, and rising mental health concerns, not only among immigrant students, but among their peers, many of whom are U.S. citizens. So this bill does two critical things. It protects students and it protects districts by giving them clear legal direction. Federal law establishes the right. This bill ensures Minnesota is meeting its legal and ethical obligation to uphold that right in practice. Clarity in law prevents harm in practice, and right now, districts and families are operating without enough of it. I urge you to support Senate File 3803. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, do we have any questions for testifiers? Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Bolden, do we have any instances of schools denying children education based off of immigration status in Minnesota?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and happy to hear from, I know we've got folks from the ACLU here as well. I will just say, I do not have that in front of me, but I would say that is not a reason to not pass this bill. We have seen the chilling effect. I've just heard tonight what we are seeing in terms of the fear that ICE being in our communities is causing in schools, and that is having real effects. Things that we can do to put things in place to be very clear that in Minnesota, we recognize that every child deserves an education, regardless of immigration status. It is the right and smart thing to put this into place.
Okay, Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you. It seems like, let's see, subdivision 3D is prohibiting a school from reporting on any immigration status of any of its students. Is that correct?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you repeat the reference or give me a line?
Senator Holmstrom.
Yep, so that'd be page 3, lines 1 through 10.
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, this is related to collecting data. I will say when we heard this bill in the Education Policy Committee, we heard from teachers, superintendents, folks in schools who said, you know, we don't collect this information. We don't want to collect this information. It does not matter to us, the immigration status of students. It doesn't matter. We aren't collecting it. We don't want to. And so this makes it clear that they don't need to because it does not matter to them. And it should not matter for the education for our children because they all deserve to be educated.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on page 1, line 10 through line 20, we appear to have a purpose statement. We've addressed this already today. It's relatively uncommon for us to pass purpose statements into law. Why is this necessary to the bill?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will say I was not involved in the drafting of this bill, so I am at a bit of a disadvantage. I will maybe call on one of our testifiers here.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Caitlin Snyder, Education Minnesota. Happy to support this bill. I understand that we frequently avoid having purpose statements, but I think that there's really important language in here on 118 where we say no child is discouraged from attending school. It feels a little bananas that we have to put that into law, but that is the situation that we're in right now. There are 6 states that are attempting to overturn Plyler that are saying that in our state, in these states, they don't want to have undocumented students in their schools. So as we see these cases work their way through the Supreme Court, it is incredibly important that we say in Minnesota, a public school is a public school and we take in all students. And that doesn't matter how your parents got here. We are going to serve your students here in Minnesota.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you. Minnesota spends tens of billions of dollars on education, and many of our schools are still wildly underfunded, that are facing mandates that they can't keep up with. They're firing teachers. And I think that there's a sect of the population that certainly is asking, why are we paying to educate children that don't have documented status, whose parents don't have a right to be here? And that is a question that certainly the courts they have ruled on, and they may rule on again. Nobody is trying to take away that access in Minnesota, but to limit the access of people to understand just how many of their taxpayer dollars are going to this seems really unfair. It seems like we're telling Minnesotans you have to pay for it, but we're going to hide what you're paying because we don't want you to ask these questions. And I think that Minnesotans deserve access to this information. They should know what they're footing the bill for. Thank you.
Senator Westlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Holmstrom, how many undocumented students are in schools in Minnesota?
Senator Holmstrom.
So this is not my bill. I'm not testifying before this bill, and I'm not making the case that this bill should become law. I'm not interested in testifying in support of this bill.
Well, Madam Chair,
Senator Westlin.
It's interesting that he wouldn't answer the question because he just raised the issue about all the money that's being spent apparently on undocumented students. Maybe one of the testifiers knows, do you know how many students are currently in K through 12, overall K through 12 classes in the state of Minnesota?
Madam Chair,
Ms. Schneider.
there are approximately 800,000 students in public schools in Minnesota. There's another 70,000 that attend private school or non-publics.
Madam Chair.
Senator Westlin.
So it appears that roughly 21,000 students out of 800 and some thousand students may potentially be undocumented in the state of Minnesota. So I'm going to suggest, do a little math here, but I'm going to suggest that the challenges in our educational system are not the problem of immigrants, legal or otherwise, in our schools. 21,000 of 800,000 students, looks like that's 0.02. I don't know. We're not going to do math at this time of night. But in any event, I think it's really disingenuous to suggest that somehow the challenges we have in terms of funding our educational system in this state somehow are the fault of undocumented students. And at the end of the day, it's interesting to me, too, that we talk a lot about constitutionality, and I guess everybody likes things that are constitutional or come down from the Supreme Court as long as they agree with them. But we do have clear direction from the Supreme Court for decades now. Of course, you know, we have a new court that has stated that we cannot deny children an education. So it's really troubling to me that the sort of attacks on people who really are just trying to live their lives and on kids who are just trying to go to school and get an education. I just think it's really unfortunate, to say the least, but I don't think it's inappropriate to blame everything that's going on that people disagree with on immigrants in our society.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Senator Westlin made a very interesting point. I don't know where she came up with her 21,000 number, but the truth is we don't know how many students are undocumented in Minnesota. And this bill would make sure that we could never know. But if the number was 21,000, basic math, there's a $250 million cross subsidy that we have no way of funding. $11,800 per kid, that adds up to the cross subsidy being solved in Minnesota. So I think Minnesotans genuinely deserve to know, especially when we come to them every single year and say that we are in a crisis of financial failure in our schools. I think they deserve to know what their money is being spent on. This bill doesn't, it certainly doesn't address a problem of kids not being allowed in school. That has already been addressed by Plyer versus Doe. So I don't know what we're trying to solve. It seems like this bill exists purely to stop Minnesotans from asking questions, which I think is wrong.
Boy, I come back into the discussion, it doesn't sound like the bill that I thought was before us. All right, is there any further discussion on Senate File 3803? The intention is to lay it over for possible inclusion. Senator Bolden.
Thank you.
Thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just end with this, that it is, every child deserves an education. And even if that doesn't persuade you, it does not make sense for us as a state to have, to not educate children, to have a permanent underclass of uneducated people that will have long-term effects on our state. That does not make any sense. That is not a smart thing to do. I will also just note that whether someone is documented or undocumented, that can change from day to day by the whims of our federal government, who are deciding at different times in different ways that this group of people now is documented and I'm going to take this status away. It is not clear from day to day, and so that changes. And again, I would go back to our schools do not want that. They do not want to have, it does not matter to them because it is our responsibility to be sure that every child gets an education.
Senate File 3803 is laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Clark, Senate File 3570. Members, it is the intention to lay this over for possible inclusion as well. And I understand John Beeler is anticipated to testify here as well. You can come forward and have a seat next to Senator Clark. Unless you're just here to answer questions. Just here to answer questions. Okay, Senator Clark, tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Committee, I bring you Senate File 3570, which clarifies that post-secondary access to post-secondary facilities by law enforcement pursuing civil actions are bound by the need for a judicial order or a judicially issued subpoena. Senator Latz, I do have an A4 amendment that was published to remove a redundancy in my bill, as well as change the term federal immigration to law enforcement agents throughout the bill.
All right, this is not the first committee where this bill has been heard, so it's not considered an author's amendment.
Correct. Would you like me to?
Why don't you tell us about the bill a little more first, and then we'll address the amendment.
Thank you. So as, thank you, Chair Latz. As Chair Latz noted, prior to this stop, we were in higher education and now here in judiciary and public safety. The main message is this: let's ensure that let's give law enforcement agents guardrails and a legal framework to uphold and stay within the bounds of the U.S. Constitution while operating in an essential space, our college campuses. In Section 1, this is judiciary's jurisdiction. Basically, this section says a judicial warrant or an order or a subpoena is needed to be on campus. No loitering in parking lots hoping to grab someone. No hanging out at nearby bus stops and tackling someone waiting there. A warrant is needed. In Section 2, It discusses universities and agencies cannot claim that citizen status is public information that can be shared in a directory. Section 3 is where I will be updating within the amendment about limits on access to law enforcement agents and on post-secondary institutions. Now, why do we need this? During President Trump's Metro surge and his stated goal of retribution, we saw the U.S. federal government acting outside the bounds of the Constitution. On Monday, March 9th, Judge Tolstra wrote that ICE and HSI adopted a policy authorizing federal immigration officers to conduct investigatory stops based on ethnicity or race without reasonable suspicion that individuals were violating immigration laws. Judge Tolstra observed what all of us saw, agents acting outside the bounds of the Constitution, and he spent 111 pages detailing that fact. As you heard previously, until January 2025, the policy of the Department of Homeland Security was what was outlined in this bill. College campuses are sensitive places on which ICE and HSI must have judicial warrants, orders, or subpoenas to access. And reportedly, they have reinstated that policy, but have not yet published it. And in negotiations to fund the Federal Department of Homeland Security, Trump administration seemingly has agreed to codify essential spaces into federal law. But we need Minnesota law to say, follow the Fourth Amendment and do it on college campuses. College campuses and universities are integral to the success of Minnesota. Our college campuses and universities attract students to Minnesota. They keep high school students here in Minnesota, and they're the hub of new technologies and ideas that drive the economy of Minnesota. So Senate File 3570 is to ensure that our law enforcement is bound by the Fourth Amendment and the U.S. Constitution are not optional here.
Senator Clark, why don't you go ahead and give us the detail on the A4 amendment?
Thank you, Chair. The A4 amendment makes modifications on page 5 and 6. So on page 5, I want to delete federal immigration and insert law enforcement agents. And then it defines law enforcement agents. And then on page 6, line 2, delete a written statement of purpose. A warrant does that. That's what I'm deleting is redundant. And then again, there's a few spots to change federal immigration to law enforcement agent. So that, in effect, then ensures that we are applying this expectation to all law enforcement agents in Minnesota and not a subset.
I'll note that in one of the previous bills, I think it was the school site bill, maybe, there was a written statement of purpose that was required, and that was still in the language of the bill. So just maybe council can note if it needs to be technically corrected in that regard. Maybe put a pin in it for when we get back to one of the other bills. Are there any questions or discussion regarding the A4 amendment? Senator Holmstrom, to the amendment specifically, please.
Yes. So my question is, if campus police decides to enter into a 287G agreement and part of their role becomes immigration enforcement, are they banned from policing their own campus?
Senator Clark.
Chair Latz, Senator Holmstrom, the intention of this bill is to apply to all law enforcement agents.
Senator Holmstrom.
So specifically, this bans a law enforcement agent from entering campus. So if that agency enters into a 287G agreement, what you're saying in this bill is they effectively cannot enter into a 287G agreement. Is that correct?
Senator Clark.
Chair Latz, Senator Holmstrom, the intention of this bill is to ensure that they cannot enforce civil actions without a federal judicial warrant.
Senator Holmstrom.
Does it state only civil actions?
Senator Clark.
Chair Latz.
I think Senator Clark is looking for the answer to your question, Senator Holmstrom.
I've got the answer.
Senator Holmstrom proposes to answer his own question. Senator Holmstrom.
Upon second review, line 1.7 of the amendment does clarify to make a civil arrest.
Which line are you referring to
1.7 of the A4.
Of the amendments, Chair Latz.
of the amendment? Is there any further discussion on the A4 amendment? Not seeing any. Senator Clark moves adoption of the A4 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. To the bill as amended. Any discussion? Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Senator Clark, so this is only to make a civil arrest. So if a immigration enforcement agent, or sorry, if a campus security officer operating under 287G agreement believes that an individual has entered the country twice, making it a felony, does this bill allow for them to enter the campus under that insinuation?
Senator Clark.
Chair Latz, Senator Holmstrom, if they have a warrant, a signed judicial warrant, yes.
Any further discussion on the bill? Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 5, lines 12 and 13, what's the private post-secondary institution referenced there?
Chair Latz.
Senator Clark.
Chair Latz, Senator Kroon, this is fairly standard higher education language to ensure that we are including private institutions such as a St. Thomas, as well as, so we go sort of through the University of Minnesota, the metro state type system, as well as private institutions. And that is sort of standard language that is within, since they receive funding like the state grant, that we can request, or we can put that type of expectation on them.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're going to dictate the policies of private institutions on which law enforcement officers can be on their campuses under what certain circumstances because they participate in the state grant program? Chair Latz.
Senator Clark.
Chair Latz, Senator Kroon. In short, this is language that we use with regularity. It's as being part of the higher education system within the state of Minnesota. So, yes.
Further discussion or questions? Not seeing any. Senate File 3570 as amended is laid over. Too much here. Okay. I got what I have. I have what I need. Okay.
Playing it over. Tell me what we're doing.
Senator Latz, you have Senate File 3699.
So I'm told, Madam Chair.
Tell us about your bill, please. Oh. Okay, strike that. We're going to take Senate File 3699 from the table. Now, Senator Latz, please tell us about your bill.
Madam Chair, this is the bill we've already heard relating to setting aside courts, as places where immigration enforcement would not be allowed to take place. We've already had an extensive hearing on this particular bill, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. I am told we have an A1 amendment. Senator Latz, would you like to offer the A1?
So moved.
John Beeler from the ACLU can help explain the A1 amendment. Mr. Beeler, welcome to the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about this amendment?
Thank you, Chair. John Beeler, Policy Counsel for the ACLU of Minnesota. This amendment is essentially Bill SF 4242, protected spaces for healthcare facilities. The bill was heard and recommended to pass out of the Health and Human Services Committee last week, I believe. Senator Mann was unable to be here this evening, and this is how the bill is being offered. It is similar to the protected spaces or sensitive spaces locations bills that have been discussed earlier, although there are some slight changes that have been made after discussions with the Hospital Association and reflective of the nature of healthcare facilities as opposed to courthouses, schools, daycare facilities, things like that we've already spoken about.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baylor. Is there any questions or comments as to the A1 amendment?
I think there's an intent through Jackie to put dates in the A1. Do you want me to read them into it?
Sounds like a plan. Before we get to that, I think Mr. Backus has some input for us.
Madam Chair, members, my understanding is that there's a desire to put dates in the bill related to when the policies have to be adopted. So the amendment would be on line 2.24, 3.12, 3.26, and 4.11. Delete the dash or whatever that is and insert December 31st, 31, 2026.
All right, everybody
moved.
understand?
I'd incorporate that into the A1 amendment.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Senator Kroon, you had something to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if I have something to add. I just trying to understand the amendment, had a couple questions. So I'm assuming the intent of this, I'm on page 2 of the amendment, limits on access to healthcare facility premises. So kind of the intent of this is that the healthcare facility can't allow a law enforcement agent to enter the facility for purposes of civil immigration enforcement unless they have a valid judicial warrant. So would that include places of public accommodation within a hospital or other healthcare facility?
Senator Latz or Mr. Baylor?
I'll defer to Mr. Beeler.
So, sorry, Senator. Thank you, Chair. Senator, I was looking for the site to draw your attention to. On page 3, lines 3.6 to 310, the bill proposes, the amendment proposes that the healthcare facilities adopt a policy about non-public and public spaces, and that definition should be in that space as well. So that would essentially define for the healthcare facility what the non-public and public spaces are.
Senator Kroon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Who defines what are the public and non-public? Does each healthcare system get to define that for themselves, or is the statute defining that for them?
Mr. Baylor.
Thank you, Chair, Senator Kroon. Given the broad definition of healthcare facility, when we were speaking with Senator Mann about this, she thought it was prudent to leave this decision to the policy, to each facility itself. The goal of that being, this sets the minimum thresholds that the facility must have, but does allow them to adopt individualized policies for their facility.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What would an emergency room be characterized here? Would it be up to each healthcare system, whether that's a public place or a non-public place? It would just be up to them to define that, or would this statute dictate that?
Mr. Baylor.
The statute envisions that they would adopt policies on that, so that would be up to the facility themselves.
Senator Kroon.
So, okay, not to belabor the point, but if a hospital decided that an emergency room in their hospital was a public place, they could freely do that, and there would be nothing in this bill that would prohibit them from doing that. And then if they declared it a public space, there would be no prohibition against a federal agent from coming into the emergency room waiting area, let's say, and exercising immigration enforcement.
Mr. Baylor.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Curran, drawing your attention back to subdivision 1 of section 2 on lines 27 to 212. Civil immigration enforcement remains prohibited within the healthcare facility sites.
Senator Kroon.
Okay, so regardless of how they designate, there's no immigration enforcement anywhere in the facility under this bill, is that right?
Mr. Baylor.
Absent a judicial warrant or exigent circumstances, no.
Thank you. All right, Madam Chair?
Senator Kroon.
Thank you. Okay, so let's take the emergency room waiting room area as an example. And let's say a federal immigration agent enters the waiting room, emergency room waiting area with a patient that needs to be seen in the emergency room. And that patient is in the custody of that federal immigration agent. So they are acting out their official duties as federal immigration agents. What is a hospital employee supposed to do in that situation?
Mr. Baylor.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Curran, that would not be considered for the purposes of civil immigration enforcement once somebody is in custody of the immigration enforcement. It is not up to hospital staff to determine the nature of that custodial arrangement.
Senator Kroon.
You don't think that a federal immigration agent that has somebody in their custody, that's not carrying out federal immigration enforcement?
Mr. Baylor.
Chair, Senator Curran, somebody who is in the custody of federal immigration officials, that is, we don't consider that we don't anticipate that that is civil immigration enforcement, nor do we consider that under the bill. We have discussed with Senator Mann, and I know she was considering it, putting in clarification that custodial visits or custodial entry into healthcare facilities could be clarified in the bill. And if clarification is needed, that's something to discuss with Senator Mann.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm under the impression this is now Senator Latz's bill since he's introducing it as an amendment here. So perhaps I think there absolutely needs to be some clarification here. I mean, we can say whatever we want about it, but just as I'm sitting here, that clearly is immigration enforcement. That's ongoing immigration enforcement. And I don't know how we'd want to put hospital employees in a situation of determining whether that's immigration enforcement and potentially violating federal law, obstruction laws, in order to comply with state law. Wouldn't you agree that that should need some clarification?
Mr. Baylor.
Chair, Senator Gruen. The difference is when we're defaulting to immigration enforcement is there is civil immigration enforcement and there is criminal immigration enforcement. Bringing somebody into a healthcare facility in custody for medical treatment does not implicate civil immigration enforcement. It would not require the healthcare facilities to make that determination. They would not be needing a judicial warrant. That's an emergency or exigent circumstance as clarified by line point 2.20.
Senator Kroon.
So you're saying the hospital employee would know that if a federal immigration official comes into the emergency room with someone in their custody, the hospital employee is supposed to know that that's not a civil immigration enforcement action?
Mr. Baylor.
Chair, Senator Gruen, that is an emergency circumstance anticipated in lines 2.2, which is an exception to this bill. Presumably, they're entering the healthcare facility for healthcare-related purposes, which we believe would fall under that emergency circumstance.
Madam Chair?
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What if it's not an emergency room? What if it's a clinic and it's not a medical emergency? Same scenario.
Mr. Baylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Gruen. I am unaware of immigration enforcement accompanying detainees to routine medical checkups, but if that clarification would be helpful, that's certainly something that Chair Latz could consider.
Senator Kroon. Any other questions or comments on the whatever it is, A1 amendment? Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Latz, page 4, lines 7 through 9 requires that healthcare facilities at their own new expense provide training to all of their employees. And it appears to include every employee of the healthcare facility, from janitorial staff to security to physicians. Is that correct?
Mr. Baylor or Senator Latz?
Madam Chair, Senator Holmstrom, it does not define the scope of employees, so it may well include all employees. Now, how broad the training is with regard to any particular group of employees might differ, but it does say that there should be training on the policies.
Senator Holmstrom.
Since any employee might encounter a law enforcement agent, it's probably a good idea for everyone to be trained in how to handle it.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fair enough. Have you done any research in the number of employees that exist in healthcare in Minnesota?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Holmstrom, no.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Latz, are you aware of what this might cost per employee to put on a training of this caliber?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Holmstrom, no.
Senator Holmstrom.
Okay, well, I am a realtor and I do continuing education, usually about $20 an hour for a credit. So let's say it takes an hour to do this training, half an hour. They're still paying the employee to sit there. Let's say on average $20 per employee, 500,000 healthcare employees on the low side in the state. That's a $10 million increase to healthcare costs across the state of Minnesota, which are of course going to be passed on to insurance companies and passed down to premium payers, you and me. This seems like a pretty expensive mandate to be putting on the people of Minnesota. I guess I don't know if it's entirely necessary.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee on the A1 amendment? Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question is, does this really need to be an annual training?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Holmstrom, yes.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess if the author is not interested in lowering the healthcare costs, I can't help with that. Second question is, this seems...
Madam Chair.
Senator Latz.
Senator Holmstrom, I answered your question as you posed it.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will amend my statement. If the senator insists on increasing healthcare costs, I will move on. So this seems entirely different than court access. Is there a reason that this can't just be two different bills?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Holmstrom, first of all, I would argue to your previous bold statement that perhaps some increase in healthcare costs is justified for purposes of the ends intended to be here, which is to create the ability for people who are concerned about immigration enforcement being brought against them to get health care in our healthcare facilities without being afraid of being detained. And in fact, I would suggest if this encourages them or facilitates them getting to the less expensive forms of delivery of health care in healthcare facilities, rather than waiting until their medical condition degrades to the point where they need to call an ambulance and be delivered to the emergency room, which is the most expensive way of providing health care, then this would actually provide savings in the healthcare system. So unless you've done the research on how all of those things would interact, I don't think any of us are in a position to try to speculate about any number, whether it's positive or negative here. Now, as to your second question, with regard to why don't we just leave it at the courts, it's the intention of this committee to assemble a comprehensive bill that includes a variety of like circumstances, rather than send all the bills out separately. So you haven't quite figured out yet why we laid over all of the bills that we did. The possible inclusion is going to happen tonight.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Latz, you made a really great point, and I applaud you for it. Is there a reason you haven't included a fiscal note into this?
Senator Latz.
As far as I'm aware, no one has asked for it, nor is there any suggestion yet that government expenditures might be involved in connection with the application here. But I don't know, this particular bill wasn't my underlying bill, so I was not involved in the decision whether or not to request a fiscal note.
Senator Holmstrom.
I think it might be prudent to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was trying to look up like what constitutes a civil enforcement action after our last line of questioning, because I heard two reasons why you said it wouldn't be a problem in my hypothetical. One, first you said, well, that wouldn't, if the patient was in the custody of the federal agent, that wouldn't be civil immigration enforcement. And then the second reason you said that that would fall under the emergency exception. I want to get back to the first one because I'm not an expert in federal immigration law at all, but if civil immigration enforcement involves locating, arresting, and removing non-citizens for civil violations of federal immigration law, wouldn't the removing part, couldn't that include my hypothetical, where the person gets hurt and they have to go to the ER or urgent care or whatever. The person's in their custody, but it's still part of a civil immigration enforcement action. Isn't that possible?
Mr. Baylor.
Chair, Senator Gruen. Yes, and I believe that the policies aren't, it's not an A or a B, it's an A and a B. It is civil immigration enforcement, but also exigent or emergency circumstances. So immigration enforcement, state, federal, local, can enter a healthcare facility for criminal immigration enforcement or exigent circumstances or an emergency exception. So an ICU or an ER would be an emergency exception.
Senator Kroon.
Okay, so the first reason really isn't valid because it's certainly possible that as part of a civil immigration enforcement action, a federal immigration enforcement could have a patient in their custody that they're responsible for. And so then would it be up to the hospital employee just to make a determination on whether it's an emergency and that's what it rises or falls on?
Senator Kroon, maybe I can help you out here. Lines 2.8 and 2.9 indicate that the reason they are entering the healthcare facility is for purposes of civil immigration enforcement. If they're bringing someone in custody to the hospital, they're entering the facility for purposes of receiving medical treatment, whether it's an emergency, not an emergency. If it is emergency, there's another subpart to this amendment that would apply. But if they're entering the healthcare facility for the purposes of receiving healthcare or seeking healthcare for the person who is in custody, they're not entering for purposes of civil immigration enforcement. Mr. Baylor or Senator Latz, anything to add?
I think that covers it, Chair. Thank you.
Senator Kroon?
Okay, well, thanks, Madam Chair. Then under that scenario, then if they're with a patient, then they're perfectly welcome to be there. Is that, and if that's the case, then that's fine. I would like it on the record to say if a federal immigration enforcement comes into an emergency room with an illegal immigrant for the purpose, I mean, they're not randomly bringing them into an emergency room, presumably they need care, then there's nothing in this bill that would require the hospital to remove them.
Mr. Baylor or Senator Latz?
Chair, for the purposes of accompanying someone in custody for the purposes of treatment, this bill does not address that fact. But what we have seen and what we saw in our healthcare facilities across our state was immigration enforcement bringing people in and then quizzing other patients, quizzing family members, taking aside employees. That is civil immigration enforcement. So that would be outside the scope of their authorization to enter the property. But entering the property for the purposes of healthcare treatment for someone in their custody falls outside the scope of this bill.
Senator Kroon? Any other questions or comments on the A1 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the A1 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. No. The motion prevails, the A1 is adopted. Any questions or discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing none, Senate File 3699 will be laid over.
Putting the other ones into this right now. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Right, okay.
You focus on your 7.
Okay.
All right. Next, we are taking Senate File 3590 from the table. This bill has to do with, well, you know what? They're just going to pass it out. All right. Good deal.
So 3590, I think she signed it. I think she meant ran out of copies, yeah. Okay, Priya, do you want to take over my definition? No, this is an A1. Right? Yeah. No. Okay. No. No, we just make a motion.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Senate File 3590 has been heard in committee. Are there any further amendments for Senate File 3590? Seeing none, Senator Latz, will you move that the language of Senate File 3590 as amended be incorporated into Senate File 3699?
Madam Chair, I think Senate File 3699 is still on the table, so I think what I'd recommend that we do is go through the other bills that we promised to bring back. Once we've done all of those and laid them on the table, then we can go through, we can bring 3699 off the table and we can amend into it.
Sounds like a good plan. All right, so Senate File 3590 is laid over. And we will take Senate File 3628 from the table. And staff will distribute that along with a new amendment for members to consider. All right, Senate File 3628 has been heard in this committee. We're taking it from the table. And Senator Latz, would you like to speak to the A2 amendment?
Madam Chair, the A2 amendment is a delete everything amendment. It basically splits out the provisions relating to the Minnesota Constitution and the federal Constitution. It sets out separate subdivision relating to damages. But I don't think there are any changes in the language on damages. It sets out a separate subdivision relating to statute of limitations. The original bill had 6 years. The amendment proposes 3 years after accrual of the cause of action. And it deletes the intergovernmental collaboration agreements provision. I think we also, no, that's what I've got. So I move adoption of the A2 amendment.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Senator Latz moves
I
adoption.
do need to make a correction of that. The damages relating to attorney's fees were, let me just double check here. Yes, with regard to prevailing party attorney's fees, the original bill has shall, the amendment says may, so it would be at the discretion of the court.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Senator Latz has moved the A2 amendment. Any discussion or questions as to the A2 amendment? Senator Kroon was waiting for that. So it was a hesitant.
Yeah, so is the purpose of this A2 is it to this state cause of action against state law enforcement officers can only be for state constitutional violations? Is that accurate?
Senator
Madam
Latz.
Chair, Senator Kroon, no. Subdivision 1 of the amendment is specific to state constitutional violations. Subdivision 2 of the amendment is specific to United States constitutional violations. It's just language that clarifies the provisions are separated out into different subdivisions.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The punitive damages provision here, it looks like you're getting rid of the retroactivity of punitive damages, but for regular damages, is that still retroactive?
Senator Latz.
That appears to be the case. Perhaps Mr. Beeler can answer that, but looks like it to me as I'm reading through it.
Mr. Beeler, any wisdom you can provide?
Thank you, Chair. John Beeler, ACLU of Minnesota. That's correct. The punitive damages it will not be retroactive until after the effective date of the bill.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe this is a question for after the amendment is adopted, but how, on regular damages, how far back does that go for retroactivity?
Mr. Bueller or Senator Latz?
Madam Chair, the effective date says it applies to causes of action accruing on or after December 1, 2025. So that would be the, as far back as the retroactivity goes, as I read it.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And how common is it to have retroactivity on civil liability damages, just as a general matter? Is this something we do a lot, or is this pretty uncommon?
Senator Latz or Mr. Bueller?
Well, Madam Chair, it's not unprecedented. It's certainly been done in the past. The Child Victim Act that we passed a number of years ago actually reopened a statute of limitations for 3 years for causes of action that had accrued, 20, 30 years before. So there was specific explanation for why we did that in the Child Victims Act. There's a specific reason why this has a retroactive effective date as well, so that the cause of action could cover the conduct of the immigration surge as well.
Senator Kroon. Any other questions or comments on the A2 amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting the A2 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. As to the, what? Any further discussion on Senate File 3628 as amended? All right, seeing none, Senate File 3628 as amended is laid over. What's next? All right. The next bill we will consider, we will take Senate File 3660 from the table, and staff will distribute that to members.
No, no.
This is a bill we have already heard in this committee. If I'll open it up if members have any additional amendments for Senate File 3660. Seeing no further amendments, Senate File 3660 is laid over. Senator Limmer.
I don't know if we had anyone explain this bill. We just laid it over immediately.
Senator Limmer, this bill was already heard in this committee. It was taken from the table tonight to
right.
attach any additional amendments that members might want to bring. We'll now be taking Senate File 3688 from the table, and that is either being distributed or has already been distributed. This bill was also heard previously in this committee, but we do have another amendment to consider, which is the A6 amendment. Senator Latz, can you explain the A6 amendment?
I'm going to ask Mr. Beeler to come forward to assist with this, Madam Chair. The A6 amendment is a delete everything amendment that adds clarifying language with regard to the civil action and the scope of the civil action, and has a different effective date.
Mr. Bailey, could you introduce yourself and speak to the A6 amendment?
Madam Chair, Mr. Beeler is not familiar with this particular amendment, so if you give me a moment, I will explain.
Ms. Primo tells me she's got some wisdom to offer.
Perfect.
Ms. Primo.
Madam Chair, wisdom is a stretch. This amendment is a DE, and it addresses, I believe, a concern that may have been raised at the previous hearing, because the previous version of this bill set up an affirmative defense borrowed from the current law criminal statute. So instead of that approach where the defendant would have to prove the affirmative defense, it's now moved as an element of the cause of action that the plaintiff must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant could have investigated and rendered assistance as provided under the statute without significant risk of bodily harm to themselves or others.
Thank you, Ms. Primo. Anything further to add on the A6, Senator Latz?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Senator Latz moves adoption of the A6 amendment. Any discussion from members? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir Latz, maybe you can answer the question that Senator Murphy could not answer for me when we had this before us. In the event that an individual in self-defense shot someone, this would obligate that individual to render aid to the victim of the shooting. Perhaps that person was a criminal attacking someone. I would imagine there might be a situation where a victim may be attempted rape or any other kind of heinous assault, and they may be a concealed carry individual, and in self-defense shoots the person, and then emotionally they're taking off, they're running, because they don't know if that individual is going to come after them. Would this provision still demand that that person render aid when they fear for their life?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, no, because the change in the A6 amendment provides they have to render assistance or aid basically only if they don't have a significant risk of bodily harm to themselves or others. So if they fear for their life, they're probably concerned about that risk. I don't think that would. I don't think they'd be covered by this.
Senator Limmer.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments as they relate to the A6 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of the A6 amendment say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments on 3688? Seeing none, Senate File 3688 is laid over. Okay. All right. Taking Senate File 3699 back from the table. And, all right. Senator Latz moves the language from Senate File 3590 as amended be incorporated into 3699. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries and the language is adopted. Senator Latz moves that the language of Senate File 3628 as amended be incorporated into Senate File 3699. Any discussion on the amendment or on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion is adopted and the language is incorporated. Senator Latz moves the language of Senate File 3660 as amended be incorporated into Senate File 3699. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries and the language is adopted. Senator Latz moves the language from Senate File 3688 as amended be incorporated into Senate File 3699. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no.
No.
Motion prevails and the language is adopted. Senator Clark moves the language of Senate File 3570 as amended be incorporated into Senate File 3699. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no.
No.
Motion prevails and the language is adopted. Senator Umu Verbatim moves the language of Senate File 3616 be incorporated into Senate File 3699. Stand by. Disregard. This one? All right. So Senator Umu Verbatim withdraws her motion. However, Senator Pappas moves the language of Senate File 3803 be incorporated into Senate File 3699. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no.
No.
The motion prevails and the language is adopted. Ms. Primo, are we ready for an amendment to 3616? Can you explain the amendment?
Madam Chair and members, during the discussion on Senator Clark's bill, I believe it may have been Senator Latz who pointed out that this bill, 3616, also had a reference to written statement of purpose. And so the amendment will be to take that out. And one way to do that is line 1.21, delete the period, the employee must, insert and then on line 2.1, delete everything before valid, delete everything after identification, and delete line 2.2, and insert a period.
Senator Umu Verbatim, would you like to incorporate that change into the language of Senate File 3616?
Yes, so moved.
Any discussion? Yes, Senator Limmer.
Could we read the revised sentence now?
Ms. Primo, can you help us with that?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's a little bit of a long one. An employee of a child care center must not consent to a federal, state, or local official entering a child care center for the purposes of civil immigration enforcement unless the official provides the employee with a warrant signed by a judicial officer and valid identification.
Senator Limmer.
Madam Chair, just a question, is there a penalty in the event that the employee would do so?
Does your question relate to the
Madam Chair, it relates to the
amendment?
the revised sentence.
Okay.
That we're-
Ms. Primo?
Madam Chair and members, it's possible that the employee could be subject to our default petty misdemeanor because this is a prohibited act, and if there's a violation, our default statute says that for a prohibited act, the person may be subject to a petty misdemeanor. It's possible that the employee could be subject to their own sort of employment child care center policies.
Senator Limmer?
Madam Chair, could the employee, if this passed, lose their job?
I suppose that would depend on the employer's policies. I don't know that this legislation would dictate whether a person would lose their job or not.
So, Madam Chair, it essentially does not trigger more than a petty misdemeanor, possibly, according to counsel, and it would be subject to the labor agreement that might be agreed upon between employer and employee, I suspect.
I missed the last part of that. Was that a question? I'm sorry, Senator Limmer.
I was just thinking out loud, thinking that either it possibly, according to counsel, possibly trigger a petty misdemeanor, or it would be a violation of an employee contract with an employer. And who knows what that would be. All right.
Any other discussion on the proposed amended language of Senate File 3616? Senator Holmstrom.
I don't have the file in front of me right now, but if I remember correctly, this is an effective date of immediately after passage, correct?
Following enactment, correct.
Madam Chair.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would it be wise, because there's a criminal penalty, to extend the effective date out to August 1st?
Thank you, Senator Holmstrom. A petty misdemeanor is not a crime. It's a violation. Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amended language of Senate File 3616? Seeing none, Senator Umu Verbatim moves the language of Senate File 3616 with the amendment as described by council be incorporated into Senate File 3699. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no.
No.
Motion prevails and the language is adopted as amended. We'll be in recess for just a few minutes.
699. And we have a motion to include some of the language from Senate File 3611 with some additional changes. Senator Kunesh has been working with council, so I'll ask council to read the language that would be added to Senate File 3611. Mr. Backus.
Madam Chair, members, this is going to be quite messy, so please bear with me. I think the most important thing to point out is that Senator Kunesh is going to add a new definition instead of school, and I'll read the whole thing, of course, but instead of school site on line 1.9, it's going to be a reference to school property from the law that prohibits firearms on school property. And that property will include public and private elementary, middle, et cetera, school buildings and their improved grounds. It'll include school buses, and it'll include portions of buildings or facilities under the temporary control of the school if it's posted for school uses. So that's kind of the concept to remember. And then there's a whole bunch of changes that have to be made to incorporate that. Another thing to remember here is this broadens the bill from just a bill that applies to public schools to schools to private schools as well. So here come the changes. On line 1.7, after the period, the second period, we'll insert a new paragraph A. That'll be a definitions paragraph. It'll state, as used in this subdivision, school property has the meaning given in section 609.66 subdivision 1D, paragraph E, clause 4, item 1, 3, and 4. And number 2, school official means a school employee, contracted service provider, school bus driver, or a person having administrative control over a building or facility described in section 609.66 subdivision 1D, paragraph E, clause 4, item 4. The paragraph A on 1.7 will become B. Line 1.8, school district or charter will be deleted. After school official will be inserted. After school official is substituted for employee on line, and then we're going to have to change on line 1.9, I'm sorry, I missed this, on 1.7, official and officials become agents and agent, because the federal officials are now being called agents because school officials are being called school officials. I'm sorry, members, would it be probably better if I just read the whole sentence? I think that'd be a lot easier. Okay, I'm not going to repeat the definition, but I will, I'll repeat the sentence that's now paragraph B. A school official must not consent to a federal, state, or local agent entering school property for purposes of immigration enforcement unless the agent provides the school official with a valid judicial warrant. The school official must request the federal, state, or local agent to provide valid identification and must grant entry to only the areas identified in the judicial warrant. Paragraph C. A school official granting entry to a federal, state, or local agent engaged in immigration enforcement must immediately notify the person having administrative control of the school and the school's general counsel or other designated legal representative. Line 1.17, C becomes D, and then official becomes agent. So I think, the final instruction will give us authority to tweak this as necessary. But again, the important thing to remember is that we're using that definition of school property from 609.66, and it's expanded to include private schools.
Would it be helpful to read the definition for folks of school property? Mr. Backus?
Yes, and this is the definition that's being cross-referenced. School property means, the item 1 means a public or private elementary, middle, or secondary school building and its improved grounds, whether leased or owned by the school. Clause 3 being cross-referenced is the area within a school bus when that bus is being used by a school to transport one or more elementary, middle, or secondary school students to and from school-related activities, including curricula, co-curricula, non-curricula, extracurricular, and supplementary activities. And then the item 4 being referenced is that portion of a building or facility under the temporary exclusive control of a public or private school, a school district, or an association of such entities where conspicuous signs are prominently posted at each entrance that give actual notice to persons of the school-related use. And if you want to read that, that's 609.66 subdivision 1D, paragraph E.
All right, are there any questions about this language? Senator Holmstrom.
Well, it certainly is an exhaustive list. The original bill did not include private schools. What was the value of adding them now?
Senator Kunesh.
Sure, because it appears in the statute 3609.66.
Senator Holmstrom.
That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there other questions about this definition of school property, which we will use? It's included in the language of Senate File 3611, which will have a motion to then add to Senate File 3699. Did you want to speak to the changes as well, Senator Kunesh, at all?
No, just that I appreciate the work that staff immediately jumped on, both our SCRFA in education as well as the staff here. Really appreciate your work.
All right. So Senator Westlin moves the language of Senate File 3611 with language suggested by council be incorporated into Senate File 3699. All right. Any questions about the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion prevails. We are down to final discussion about Senate File 3699 as amended. All right, seeing none, I'll go to you, Senator Latz, for your final motion.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate File 3699 as amended be recommended to pass and be referred to the Senate floor, and that council be directed to make any technical and clarifying corrections to reflect the work of the committee.
All right, on Senator Latz's motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion prevails, and Senate File 3699 as amended will be sent to the Senate floor. Thank you, Senator Latz.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we'll go to Senate File 4257, Senator Latz.
No. Is this what your list says? You got these 2, 3? That's all I got. Okay. But she just keeps passing more papers. It's your fault. You're learning. Delete everything. First it was 1 page, now it's 6. It's all new language. 7. It's all. I guess it is.
All right, Senator Latz, you have an author's amendment?
Madam Chair, on Senate File 4257, we did hear the bill before. We took extensive testimony on it. This is the bill that provides a mechanism to separate a victim from domestic violence from a shared wireless plan that they have with the perpetrator of the violence against that victim. We had a robust discussion. It was helpful, and that, as well as input from stakeholders, has informed the creation of the A1 amendment. It is a delete everything amendment that incorporates all those comments and input. So I'm not sure if this qualifies as an author's amendment or not. I guess the bill had not previously been amended, and we're still on the first committee hearing, so I guess it would. But I'm happy to walk through the A1 amendment if you wish. It is a delete everything amendment.
Senator Latz, I think this was the day that we had planned to hear a number of bills related to victim survivors, and then floor ran long. So it was scheduled that day, but it wasn't heard.
Oh, okay. That maybe we didn't get to it. Well, then let me tell you what it does.
That'd be great. Thank you.
The scenario of concern, the problem that this bill attempts to remedy is a situation where you have a domestic abuse victim who, with the partner, has a shared wireless telephone plan, basically. And when they have that shared plan, it creates a problem if the victim wishes to physically or otherwise separate from the partner that is abusing that person. The partner can hold the fact, well, the premise, of course, is cell phones are essential now for everyday living, lifelines to safety, communication with friends and family, use for business, for work, for social life, and for information gathering. So it's pretty critical to have access to one's cell phone. I don't need to explain that any further. To the extent that a party is abusing someone else on a shared plan that has the cell phone, the abusing party has a great deal of power or authority as a result of that shared cell phone plan or wireless plan, being able to threaten to cut it off or to force them to pay the entire bill, or all sorts of mechanisms they can use as leverage. So it's the intent of this bill is to provide an escape hatch, basically, for the abused party to be able to get out of the relationship in a safe way and not be held tethered to that relationship by virtue of a contract for the wireless plan with the abuser. To accomplish that end, the bill provides a court with authority to make changes to that wireless plan. And those changes, I'm going to simply describe in the A1 amendment because it's my intent that we replace the underlying bill in toto with the A1 amendment. So the First Amendment provision on page 2, you'll see on line 24, it provides when there are court orders providing relief in the context of, I believe this is the order for protection statute 518B, that the court, if requested by the petitioner, could issue a separate order under 518B.03, which provides for the transfer or release of domestic abuse victims from shared wireless plans. In other words, the order could be issued and then served in such a way as to protect the location of the abuse victim when the order is served. Then we basically go on then to 518B.03, which is a new provision in statute, caption transfer or release of domestic abuse victims from shared wireless plans. It's got some definitions in there. It provides for a court order that allows for the court to require the following options in an order: transferring the billing authority and rights to the wireless telephone number or numbers of a shared plan to the petitioner, which would be the victim of the abuse, petition the court for an order for release. Allows the court to remove or release the petitioner from that shared wireless plan and assign substitute telephone numbers. If the petitioner is not the protected party named in an OFP, then the court may issue an order for transferring similarly billing authority and rights in a shared plan. If the protected party is a minor, then it can go to a legal guardian or parent rather than the respondent. If it's not a minor, it can go to another person who shall serve as the account holder with the protected party's approval. It allows for the court to remove or release the protected party from the plan altogether and assign a substitute telephone number. And again, it's got a distinction between minors and not minor protected parties. Also allows for substitute telephone numbers to be issued. Subdivision 4 on page 6 then does again describe the separate order that would be issued directed to the wireless telecommunications service provider, but that order may be addressed in the same proceeding or in a separate proceeding, whatever the court thinks is most appropriate, and then allows for transfer of phone numbers. The filing fees for such an order are waived, so the party could go into court without having to pay the $327 filing fee for a civil action. A hearing is provided for. It's not required unless either the court declines to issue the requested relief or if the petitioner requests a hearing. Such a hearing as this could be heard concurrently with the order for protection hearing on the merits as well. If a court orders the transfer pursuant to this information, that transfer must be completed by the telecommunications service provider by the end of the following billing cycle. So it gives something over a month, up to almost 2 months, depending on the timing of the order, for the company to complete the transfer so they have time to implement it. There is on page 7, subdivision 8, a confidentiality provision that applies to the service provider. So they will not be disclosing information except as necessary to comply with the order. If there's an unpaid balance on the plan, subdivision 9 covers that. The account holder before the order is issued remains liable for the unpaid balance incurred before an account is transferred. And then the service provider must provide the petitioner or protected party with a partitioned telephone line and additional time to pay off the outstanding balance. And then finally, subdivision 10 provides for immunity in favor of the wireless telecommunications service provider and its officers, employees, et cetera, as long as they transfer things in accordance with the court order. That's the extent of the A1 amendment, which would replace the original Senate File 4257, and I move its adoption.
Thank you. On the A1 amendment, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Any questions about the bill? I'm going to go to Senator Westlin, and then I will go over to Senator Limmer and Holmstrom. Senator Westlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill forward. One of the other problems for someone controlling a cell phone account is, of course, we have tracking capacities on our phones. I have had instances where clients would turn off the Find My function on their phone when they came to see me in my office so that their spouse would not know they were talking to a divorce attorney, and their phone would start blowing up. I've had other people, another client whose soon-to-be former spouse reported their phone, the abuse victim's phone lost or stolen, I forget which one, and the phone got shut off. And so I just would like to say this is not something that is a rare occurrence, and it's very, very problematic for people who are experiencing domestic violence. So I appreciate you bringing this, and I think it's a good bill.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Latz, does this bill provide for when the contract is separated or when the individual is separated from a joint contract, does it cover changing a phone number? I think as I listen to you, it would recognize the transference of a phone number, but did it accommodate getting a new phone number? And I would tend to think that's probably would be pretty regular in this situation.
Yes, Madam
Senator
Chair.
Latz.
Senator Limmer, yes, it does provide for the court to issue or require the assignment of substitute telephone numbers.
Okay, and one other question.
Senator Limmer.
Senator Latz, sometimes these contracts include a purchase contract of a new phone. And it's usually done on a payment plan. And does this bill recognize the transference of a payment plan for a new phone? Or let's say it was purchased prior to this separation. Does it allow for the transference of that obligation?
It does.
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer, yes, it does, and it allows for looking for the exact language here, on line 7.8, wireless telecommunications service provider must provide the petitioner protected party with a partitioned telephone line and additional time to pay off the outstanding balance. So I don't know if there's any language specific to the ongoing installment payment plan for purchasing the equipment, but I would anticipate the way this is written that there is ample authority in here for the court to fashion in order to address that. Okay.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a concern with page 7, line 5. A person who is the account holder before an order is issued under this section remains liable for the unpaid balance incurred. My thought is in relationships, sometimes the victim might be the original account holder, and if there's a shared balance between the two of them, I would like to see some language that allows the obligation for that to be spread equally so that the victim might not get caught up with a very expensive phone bill as a result of the abuser not making payments or leading up a situation like that leading up to this.
Senator Westlin, you want to weigh in?
I think this bill specifically as I read it, only applies to situations where the protected party isn't the account holder. If the protected party owns the account and they are the owner of the account, they have the authority to split it. And this is those situations where the other person, the account's under their name. And so I don't believe the situation you're discussing is probably comes under this, because if I own the account, I have the ability to do what I want with it.
Is that your understanding, Senator Latz?
Yes.
Senator Holmstrom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 10:30 of it all got to me. Thank you.
All right, Senator Latz, was the intention to send this to the floor?
Yes, unless Mr. Turner thinks there's a fiscal aspect I need to be concerned about.
Mr. Turner?
Madam Chair, Senator Latz, there is no cost.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate Bill 4257 as amended be recommended to pass and be sent to the Senate floor.
All right, on Senator Latz's motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails and Senate File 4257 as amended is sent to the Senate floor. All right, we're moving to Senate File 4301. Senator Westlin.
All right, Senator Westlin, Senate File 4301.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe that there is an author's amendment, an A1 amendment that I would like to take up first, and then we can discuss the bill after it's amended.
Members, the packet has been handed out to you. In the packet is included an A1 amendment. It's on a little smaller print, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. This would be considered an author's amendment. This is a committee of first referral. So Senator Westlin moves adoption of the A1 as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment's adopted. Senator Westlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two more bills. We are coming to the end of a challenging and long day, and the two bills that we'll be taking up here at the end, of course, are bills addressing serious topics. This particular bill makes some changes to the domestic violence laws, and in particular looks to change some of the loopholes that we find problematic in the current language. This is a bill that I will give major props to Representative Moeller. She has worked considerably with stakeholder groups to come up with this bill, which also included this A1 amendment. And I know that this has been a passion project for her as she's looking at retirement. I'll go through the bill a bit and then I'll speak to it, Mr. Chair. So Section 1 amends the reporting requirement for the Independent Use of Force Investigations Unit in the BCA, and it requires information about the number of incidents that began with a law enforcement response to suspected or alleged abuse. There have been any number of recent high-profile cases, as seems to happen with some regularity, involving cases that involve use of force during domestic calls, and so it would be helpful to have that information reported and available. We did just remove Section 2 from this bill. Section 2 had some fairly significant changes to definitions, and based on feedback from some of our domestic violence advocates, the decision was to pull that and do some additional work on that. Section 3 amends the definition of a domestic abuse case in the statute and prosecutors to establish plans and procedures for handling domestic abuse cases. Additionally, the section adds numerous offenses that have been left out previously in statute. Section 4 requires the head of a law enforcement agency to report to the Department of Public Safety on incidents that a responding peace officer believes involve domestic violence, and requires the Commissioner of Public Safety to summarize and analyze the information from the agencies and submit a report to the legislative committees with jurisdiction over public safety. The information included in the incident report would be the date, the time, location of the incident, as well as whether the alleged offender possessed a firearm and whether the incident was referred for prosecution. At present, there is a lack of information and data collecting regarding domestic violence cases, and this information is important for agencies like the DPS and for us as legislators to know. Section 5 is actually an important part of closing a loophole that occasionally has had some very serious consequences. Section 5 removes the limitation that law enforcement officers can only make arrests for non-felony cases within 72 hours. And the problem with this is that offenders are able to basically hide from law enforcement and wait out the 72-hour time period. This is concerning as suspects who hide from law enforcement have been found to have higher rates of reoffense and have a higher lethality rate. This section in particular was brought up most frequently by victims and victim organizations. The sections that were added from the amendment, at present, victims and domestic violence victim organizations are able to get police records from misdemeanor domestic abuse cases, but they are not able to obtain felony domestic violence cases because those are not listed. And so this would close that particular loophole. Sections 6, 7, and 10 provide the alleged offenders must be detained until the offender's first court appearance. This is to ensure that the court is able to issue a domestic abuse no contact order before the offender is released. There have been situations where people are released from custody with no bail posted and no sorts of restrictions or conditions for release. Sections 8 and 9 create an improving responses to domestic violence crimes task force. Victim advocacy organizations emphasize that more data and assessments need to be done regarding lethality in domestic violence cases across the state. Additionally, this task force has a variety of other duties, including but not limited to evaluating and updating training on domestic violence cases for 911 operators, law enforcement, and so forth, and reviewing best practices for interviewing victims of domestic violence. And I will just note, Mr. Chair and members, on March 11th, there was reporting from International Falls. A woman filed for a petition for an order for protection. She did everything that she should be doing to try to keep herself safe. She detailed many, many threats. And the long and short of it was that she was murdered by her abuser. This happened days after he was released from jail without having to post bond for violating the protective order. We have another case. This was reported just today, actually, after several reports of abuse. Man accused of killing wife and her son in Anoka County. There were multiple orders for protection. There was an instance where the abuser choked the woman into unconsciousness, and we do know actually that strangulation is a significant predictor of lethality for women who are victims, not necessarily just women who experience abuse. So these things are happening on a regular basis, and the work in particular, again, I want to thank Representative Moeller, who in her capacity as a prosecutor has dealt with these issues frequently, her passion in trying to close some of the loopholes that continue to result in tragic events for those who are experiencing domestic violence. And additionally, Mr. Chair, it will provide important reporting information to help track domestic violence, including when officers show up on scene, and it is a case where there may be domestic violence involved. I appreciate your consideration of this bill. This is about keeping Minnesotans safe. It's about ensuring that all the areas of our legal and law enforcement areas have the data and information that they need. It eliminates that 72-hour rule and allows to hold offenders until their first court appearance, which will aid in the safety of victims. It will give them the opportunity to go somewhere safe before their offender, their abuser, is released from jail. This is about keeping victims safe, and I hope that I can count on a yes vote from members of this committee.
Senator Westlin, thank you for bringing forward the bill. I've got a couple of questions for you, if I may.
Certainly.
And I know you said that Chair Moeller had primarily driven the creation of this bill, but so maybe you weren't involved in some of the details here, but answer if you know. What stakeholders were involved in the input process when putting this bill together? Do you know?
I don't, do you have the answer? I know that it was a number of victims and victim organizations, which is actually was one of the primary drivers for removing changes to the definition of domestic violence. But perhaps Mr. Carlson can update other organizations that may have been involved in those conversations.
Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members. Joel Carlson, excuse me, haven't had to talk for a while. I represent Violence Free Minnesota and have since about 1999, and over a series of several months, Violence Free Minnesota and their 90-member programs worked with advocacy programs from CASA, the Hennepin County Domestic Abuse Project, and several others. We vetted this with law enforcement and prosecutors, and so I think the general group of stakeholders that we frequently work with have all had their eyes and fingerprints on the bill before you. If there's a specific part of the bill, Mr. Chairman, that came from one part or another, I can try and answer that, but it was a collaborative process that I know we've been working on for 12 months or longer.
Mr. Carlson, were any organizations involved in the criminal defense process included in these conversations?
Mr. Chairman and members, I can't say specifically myself if MACTL or other criminal defense attorneys were involved in the drafting of this. I don't know from the House hearing. I know I don't like to talk about the other body, but no one came forward with concerns at the House hearing on this bill. But I can follow up with our executive director to see if that was one of the groups that helped vet the bill.
Well, there's the Minnesota Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, which is a professional association of private defense lawyers. There are other defense lawyers that are not involved in MACTL. There's the Board of Public Defense and public defenders as a group as well, all over the state. And while I deeply appreciate the work that's here, of course, there is one overriding assumption that's made here, which is that the allegations are assumed to be true for purposes of all of this. And there is at least some portion of allegations of violations of criminal law which are not true. And in fact, there are plenty of cases that I'm going to trial and the defendants are acquitted. So the suggestion here that the defense lawyers public or private, weren't even included in the conversations that led to the content of this bill is really troubling to me.
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry.
Senator Westlin.
I can find out who was involved. I know, I just saw this in my notes, but I don't know who was on the working group or the task force that came up with some of these recommendations, and I don't know if they're represented on that. I will just say this as well, and it occurs to me, I think the intention today would be to lay this bill over. My understanding is there have been some ongoing discussions in the other body regarding some of the provisions, and I'm guessing they may be some of the provisions that you might have questions about or concerns about. There wasn't an amendment ready for those items for this hearing today, but I know that work is continuing. I believe it has to do with holding a person and so on. And like I say, I'm guessing that those are things that you're probably concerned about. I don't have that language in hand, and so I believe that this continues to be something that's being worked on to ensure that we cover all the bases, and there were some issues raised in the other body. So again, I think the idea would be to lay it over, and I'm hoping that that amendment might be ready like hopefully Monday of next week. But I can also speak to you offline because I bet your concerns are probably similar to the ones that have been raised in the other body.
Senator Westlin, you've identified certainly one of them, the mandatory detention. And I mean, there are other provisions, repeat DWIs, for example, where there's mandatory detention, but as a practical matter, that doesn't always happen anyway. There are release orders with no use, for example, as a condition of release, or release orders on domestic charges where someone's held and they get released on a no contact order, maybe not a DANCO, but for sure a no contact order, which is an order that upon which the release is conditioned. A DANCO, if there's a violation of no contact conditions, is a new crime, and there are special criteria under the Ness case that define the higher level order of risk or allegations before DANCO can be issued. My point is, defense lawyers in this state are the only people that have the constitutional, the fiduciary obligation as lawyers to look out for the protection of individuals against violations of our Bill of Rights. They're the only ones have that affirmative sole obligation. Even prosecutors who have an obligation to do justice don't have that as their primary obligation. I'd really be unhappy if we find out that they were not affirmatively included in the conversations over the last 12 months that resulted in the formulation of this bill. That almost might be enough for me just to vote against the bill alone, because the process would be fatally flawed as far as I'm concerned. Now, I don't know for sure if all of the, what provisions there might be concerns about. I know what I would be concerned about, or at least would want some further understanding about being held until the person's first court appearance. That could mean that if someone's arrested on a Friday and they're supposed to be working on Saturday, Sunday, and they don't appear in court until Monday and don't get out, then they've missed Monday as well. They've got 3 days that they've already missed work, and they might well be fired based solely on an allegation that they committed some act of domestic abuse, which includes domestic assault fear, not even requiring harm, on an allegation of someone who may have other motives for making an allegation. There are plenty of times when people get, they will say, well, they didn't want someone arrested. They just called because they wanted someone to leave. And they figured if they got the police involved, that would cause that result. I'm not questioning the sincerity of anyone in the system or people who make calls. I understand there's a very serious domestic abuse problem in the state. There are very serious consequences when things are not properly protected. But we also have a Bill of Rights and constitutional protections that need to be complied with. And we've dealt with that in lots of other contexts here, and they should apply across the board. We don't get to pick and choose where the Constitution should be applied. I think I'm going to leave it at that, except to finally note the membership on the task force. It is loaded with people involved in either victim advocacy or prosecution or public safety orientation. One member that appears, or representatives, I guess it doesn't specify number, from the Minnesota Board of Public Defense. That from the proposed makeup of this task force would be a pretty lonely voice. I would at minimum suggest a representative of the private defense bar as well. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just going to leave it at that. Senator Westlin.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate your remarks, and as I mentioned, there is likely going to be an amendment coming. I understand your concerns about process. I hope that in the end, what you will look at is whether or not the language itself addresses any concerns that you have, and vote based on the language and the policy and whether the policies make sense to accomplish the tasks we're seeking to accomplish. Like, I hope that that's the threshold that you will judge it by. I don't have control over what process was used, but I know that there were a lot of people consulted, and I know that the intention here is to try to ensure that people who are experiencing domestic violence have an opportunity to be somewhere safe. Again, I've literally just got an email this morning about conversations regarding when someone can be held. My understanding is actually there is a lot of inconsistency between a variety of parts of the law about when a person can be held. And I am committed to dealing with those things and working with you, and I'm happy to continue those conversations. When I get an amendment, the first thing I will do is send it to you and ask you for your feedback on that. If there's somebody else that needs to be added to the task force that you think would be appropriate, I'm happy to add people to the task force. But I hope what doesn't get lost is the intent of this, which is to ensure that these situations where somebody literally got released from jail without posting any bond, without posting anything, and they immediately went and murdered somebody. I do want to ensure that we are providing some sort of reasonable protections that protect the rights of the defendant to their constitutional rights to a defense, but also that we are taking appropriate steps to ensure the safety of people who all too frequently end up being victims. You know, a lot of our mass shootings involve domestic violence. They involve people who murder their entire family because that's how they're going to, whatever. So you know me well enough, Senator, to know that I am committed to making sure that the policy is sound, that the language is something that you can live with, and as long as it doesn't gut the intention of the bill, I will work with you and anyone else to try and make any changes that seem necessary to provide for those constitutional protections.
Well, Senator Westlin, I know you to be a person in good faith and to be trying to put together the best possible bill that you have here. And I just get frustrated because so often, we pick and choose where we want to apply the constitutional protections. We just spent however many hours dealing with protecting the rights of those who were unfairly targeted by federal immigration enforcement in complete abrogation of multiple parts of our Constitution. Yet people tend to minimize the significance of the Constitution when it comes to allegations of domestic violence. I also know that there was a time a couple of years ago when there was a proposal relating to a domestic violence provision that I thought really was quite unfair to the accused in our constitutional system. In fact, was open for great abuse if that were to be attempted, and we've seen law enforcement do that on occasion. I would not accept that provision into a conference committee report. We came back next year, and the parties have figured out a way to address the issue in a manner that achieved the goals of both sides, protecting constitutional rights and protecting the rights of victims to get justice. I'm willing to work with anyone. It's not just my voice. There are lots of knowledgeable defense lawyers well-versed in the Constitution along with me. Hopefully I'm completely wrong. Maybe the process did include a number of those voices in there. Senator Westlin, I know you weren't a part of that process specifically in the preparation of it, and so maybe it's there. I've just wasted an awful lot of breath and energy, but without at least those voices in the process, I have some skepticism about the proposals. So
Mr. Chair,
let's leave it at that. I'm happy to continue work on the bill.
Awesome. Just very briefly, I will just say this too, and like I say, at this point, I think we're just going to lay the bill over, so I don't want to belabor this point. But I will say that frequently in my family law practice, I very rarely, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but in my practice, I very rarely come across people who are lying about abuse. What I do often see are people who have issues, problems, even violations of HROs and OFPs, and they call the police and they're told nothing. I mean, nothing happens. And so I agree there has to be a balance. It's just, and I don't work in criminal defense. You and I are seeing different ends of this spectrum. But the cases that I have seen have been people who are experiencing domestic violence, and more often than not, they're not getting the support that they need from the system, and their allegations aren't taken seriously sometimes by law enforcement officers, even where there's a violation, and it's a clear violation. So in any event, I've appreciated this conversation. As soon as I have an amendment, I will certainly provide that to you, and I would love and welcome your feedback.
Look forward to working with you on that, Senator Westlin. Any other members of the committee have any discussion? Senator Umover-Bett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had started to talk about this in the section on detention, but I just wanted clarity on if there's any other charges where we mandate that a person is detained until their first court appearance.
Senator Westlin.
Mr. Chair, Senator Umover-Bett, and I do think there are other situations. I think this is not my area. Our chair might be able to answer this, but probably can. Yeah, or counsel, but I assume there are things like DWIs where people might be held.
Senator Umover-Bett, and repeat DWIs have a mandatory hold for court. So at least I know about that. People can be held without charge for up to 36 or 48 hours, depending on the circumstances, pending drafting or filing of a complaint as well. I think typically felonies are held for that period of time. They're not only felonies. So some of it's up to the discretion of the law enforcement and jail policy and bench policy in different jurisdictions. But yeah, there are other places where there's a mandatory hold for court. One might have conversations about whether it's the right thing to do in any particular circumstances, but yes, they are there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanting to understand how that works with other charges, and maybe looking at repeat offenses is a way to address some of the concerns. And apologies if you shared this already, but can you remind us the members that were part of the task force on domestic violence and firearm surrender? Because this is a recommendation from that task force, correct?
And I do think in information that our partisan council has provided, I'd have to look online, but it looks like there is a link to the report from the task force. I don't have that at hand, but we can certainly, before this comes up again, we can certainly make sure everybody has a copy of that.
Any further discussion on Senate File 4301? Not seeing any. All right, Senate File 4301 is laid over. Last bill of the night, Senate File 4144, Senator Westlin. Members, there's an amendment in the packet. It's a delete everything amendment. It's an A1. This is the committee of first hearing, so Senator Westlin moves adoption of the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment's adopted. The plan is to entertain a motion to pass this bill onto the floor. Senator Westlin, please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have heard emotional testimony earlier from our colleague, Senator Hoffman. This bill relates also to the incidents of June 14th, but it relates to other individuals who may experience similar situations. During the interim, Colin Hortman, who is the son of Mark and Melissa Hortman, approached Representative Moeller regarding the use and disclosure of chemical irritants used by law enforcement in his parents' home on June 14th. This bill addresses the concerns that were raised. Senate File 4144 requires law enforcement to disclose when they use chemical irritants in a building, what type of irritant was used and how much was used. Basically, one of Colin Hartman's testimony in the House talked at great length about the challenges and difficulties that they went through trying to get the home cleaned after June 14th. And one of the challenges was trying to figure out what exactly had been deployed in the home. And what has been described is in order for remediation to happen, they need to know what chemicals were used in the home. It was an arduous process in order to get the home cleaned and in order to figure out what the various chemicals were that were used. There were issues about who was going to pay for it, and ultimately, I believe it is the requirement of the state or the law enforcement agency to clean up in those situations and provide the remediation. I think the intention of this bill, Mr. Chair and members, is to ensure that in the future someone will not have to go through this process, particularly after a traumatic incident such as this. The information should be provided so the appropriate remediation and so forth can take place. So the bill, going through this in the DE amendment, requires a peace officer or law enforcement agency to provide information about the use of chemical irritants, smoke screens, or distraction devices. It requires that they must provide notice of the deployment of those chemicals to the owner of the building. If the owner is a private residence, they have to disclose it to the occupant of the residence. So that's the section dealing with the disclosure pieces. The law enforcement agency or local government, if they're requested to do so, who employs a peace officer who deployed those irritants, needs to disclose the information to the building owner, a tenant, insurer, and any person retained to do the cleaning and remediation services. Again, Your Honor, it is late, isn't it?
Here we go, Senator West.
I know. God.
Just don't call me Madam Chair.
Well,
We've
no,
been down that road already, too.
you're kind of asking me to do it now. In any event, Mr. Chair, the residue from these chemical irritants remain in the air as well as in the materials in the home for a long time after their use. It can lead to substantial health issues for anyone who may be present in the home or return to the home. This would assist families and others in knowing what kind of cleanup is necessary to remove that residue, allow them, especially in this case, to keep themselves safe and also to heal from the traumatic event that occurred. That is the bell, Mr. President.
There we go, now I'm president.
I swore we were going to be done by 11, Mr.
might be.
Chair, and I just am asking, maybe we could facilitate that.
Senator Westlin, let's move on to questions before we go any deeper here. Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Senator Westlin, beginning at line 110, a peace officer who deploys a chemical irritant within a building must provide notice of the deployment to the owner of the building and its residents or occupants. Is there a reason that the responsibility is on the specific officer that deployed it and not just on the department?
Senator Westlin.
Mr. Chair, Senator Holmstrom, I guess I don't know that, other than that if that was the person who deployed it, they might be in the best position to know what they used.
Senator Holmstrom.
I guess I read this and I think an officer in that position is probably in a very dangerous situation, and they may be unable to, maybe injured, maybe had to engage in some sort of an action and not available to immediately do that. It feels weird to require the specific officer. I don't know if you'd be open to working on that or open to an amendment.
Mr. Chair and Senator,
Senator Westrom.
I think if you move down to line 1.18, it does provide that the law enforcement agency or local government who employs the peace officer may disclose that information to the same people. So that probably covers that situation.
Chair Latz.
Senator Holmstrom.
I guess I'm confused why. It seems like I read 1.8 and the the provisions under it to require the agency to give more information than the requirements 110 through 117. Is that not the intention?
Senator Westlin.
Mr. Chair and Senator Holmstrom, I think the purpose of 1.10 through the end is to identify who has to receive the notice and the information. I think 1.6 to 1.9 states there that the law enforcement agency and local unit of government must provide information about the use. So in my view, and I don't know, maybe council can help with this, but in my view, my understanding of this deals with the requirement for notice and the requirement of who has to be notified and the information they have to be provided.
Senator Westlin, are you asking for input from council?
if council has additional information to my,
Isn't that you? It's supposed to go out. Senator Westlin, Mr. Backus and I agree that I think there's some work that could be done on the drafting of this. I mean, for example, you got a peace officer whose duty it is to notify the owner, individual unit occupants. Do we really want the police officer that deployed it to have to go knock on every door and provide notice or slip pieces of paper under the doors? Maybe the agency that employs it can somehow be responsible for getting the notice to them. Also, on line 110, it refers to chemical irritant for the notice, but 1.19 talks about deploying chemical irritants, smoke screens, or distraction devices within the building, so it's even broader. I'm thinking maybe it's worth not trying to fix the language here and now tonight, and that we give council a chance to take a look at it, to consult with you, and maybe bring the bill back next week. What do you think, Senator?
I think that's a great idea.
We agree. Senator Holmstrom, do you disagree with that? Do you have a suggestion?
I do, Chair Latz.
What's that, Senator Holmstrom?
I don't know if you've already reached out to them, but I would request that you reach out to the MPPOA or the sheriffs as well. They might have some input on how that might work best.
Is there anything further on Senate File 4144? Seeing none, Senate File 4144 as amended is laid over. Members, thank you for all of your work today, and a hearty thank you, even more so to all of our staff on both sides of the table that have done miraculous work in preparing and enabling this hearing. With that, members, we are back on Monday at our regular time here in this room. For those who observe, have a good Eid, Eid Mubarak, and for everyone, have a safe and healthy weekend. Get some sleep, because we've got deadline next Friday. We are adjourned.